In Kenya, if you want to win a tender to procure goods or services on behalf of the government, the law will tell you to follow guidelines laid out by the Public Procurement Regulatory Board. Although from watching the news, you wouldn't know this.
The directors of certain companies have admitted to have been duped into dubious business.
Says she prayed and God led her to KEMSA before walking away with a 42 million shillings tender.
How did you go to ask for funds and you had not been given the commitment that you should supply?
As the owner, who did you buy this company from?
News anchors and reporters have reported about procurement scandal after procurement scandal, linking shadowy companies typically with no track record in procuring or producing the goods or services that they are paid for. To the public, making it all seem like, well, a movie.
We begin tonight with yet another movie-like script from the KEMSA scandal that gets more bizarre by the day.
But this story doesn't come out of Hollywood. Using leaked data from Kenya's public finance management portal, IFMIS, Africa Uncensored has slowly been building a picture of a corrupt system overrun by companies flouting procurement laws and profiting heftily. In this episode of our series, Captured, we take you behind the scenes of these movie-like deals and tell the real story of a group of companies that specialize in winning tenders by gaming the system. They are all linked to a sitting senator in Kenya's parliament. Lights, camera, action. Our story begins, as many do, with a question. How do you win a tender from the Kenyan government? Here's a public procurement expert.
My name's Andrew Mukite Musangi, and I currently serve as the chair of the Public Procurement Regulatory Board, which is a board that has oversight responsibility for the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. John, the eligibility criteria is set out in Section 55, and briefly, 8 clear eligibility criteria. The first being legal capacity. One must be free from insolvency, receivership, bankruptcy, or being in the process of being wound up. Thirdly, if it's for a professional service, one must be a member of the regulated profession and must satisfy all the professional requirements for that profession. One must also not be precluded by investigative orders of our Director General. One must also not be debarred from participating in the procurement proceedings and our debarment process under the Act. One must also be compliant with their tax obligations and must not be a person convicted of corrupt or fraudulent practices. And finally, one must not be guilty of any serious violation of employment laws and practices.
However, after looking into the operations of a group of companies linked to Meru County Senator and Senate Public Investment Committee Vice Chair Mithika Linturi, we found behavior that looked suspicious and a story from the early days of the Jubilee government's reign that shows their impact. First, let's establish who Franklin Mithika Linturi is. Born in 1969 in Meru County, Linturi began as an insurance broker in the late 1990s. One of his earliest business ventures was a company he founded, Arc Choice Insurance. He would go on to create many more. Linturi's entry into politics came in 2007 when, after 2 previous failed attempts, he won the Igembe South parliamentary seat on the same party ticket as current President Uhuru Kenyatta. He would retain his seat in 2013, then become Senator of Meru County in 2017. He is now one of Deputy President William Ruto's closest allies in the region. Known by the moniker Captain, Linturi has a reputation for not running from a political fight or for starting one. Remember this, it'll be important later in this story. His links to various companies that receive government funds are vast. Linturi is linked to at least 14 different companies, either directly or via proxy, that have been paid to procure various goods and services, from medicines to sofa sets. But it is the web of transactions around the jewel in his crown of companies that gives an indication as to why Linturi's web may be so big. Atticon Limited. Enter two men, both who have close links to Atticon Limited and have worked with Linturi. This is Fred and this is Simon. We let them explain their relationship to Atticon and Linturi.
I was hearing about him. I personally had not known him, but I got to know him and I was happy working for a politician, for a well-known person in the society.
Simon is a former employee of Linturi's, and Fred's current role gives him unique insights about the group of companies.
I've had the pleasure of interacting with him, business-wise, and I know he can be a crook, and he's not straightforward at all.
They both know the group of companies' inner workings, but Atticon Limited is particularly interesting as an example of how companies within this group pivot from tender to tender. Atticon Limited began operations as a construction company owned and operated by engineers. Linturi would then acquire the company, but not only for construction. By 2013, they were engaged in the supply of altogether different kinds of goods. Here's where it gets interesting.
I, Uhuru Kenyatta.
In late 2013, just months after the Jubilee government had taken office, a tender was floated for the supply of honorary medals. Wondering what these are? These are medals awarded to people who receive national honors. According to the Kenya Gazette, that year, 296 people received national honors. They included Kenyans of various extractions, from President Uhuru Kenyatta's mother, Mama Ngina Kenyatta, to a posthumous award for Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai, to opposition leader Raila Odinga. The procurement of medals for the awards was done through the office of the Deputy President. Enter our next character.
My name is Amirian Chebet Kitani. At the time I met the Senator for Meru, that's Mithika Linturi, I was the Chief of Staff to the Deputy President.
When was this? What time frame was this?
This was from 2013, around April, after the Deputy President's office had been set up, because I came in as a Chief of Staff.
One distinguishing characteristic of the companies we have observed that win tenders is that their owners seem to have information about upcoming tenders that isn't yet in the public domain. It would seem that from 2013, Linturi, at the very least, had the opportunity to get this kind of privileged information.
But remember, we were friends, huh?
Yes.
Yes. Because he used to come often to my office, seeking favors, and I would then take those favors to the Deputy President. Sometimes the Deputy President would send him to my office. Yeah, but he was a frequent visitor. The tender happened in 2014, and the reason that tender was at the Deputy President's office then was because the process of awarding medals to officers was actually spearheaded by the Deputy President. So the presidency at that time didn't have enough medals, and a procurement commenced. Remember, I told you I was not in the procurement. I was not an administrative officer, so I was not involved in the procurement. However, when such projects happen, as an officer and being a senior officer at the Deputy President's office, you would be given a report and you'll be told this particular tender is being floated and this person has been awarded and whether the person has delivered or not delivered. So by the time I left the Deputy President's office, I think the whole delivery, I don't know, had not happened, or it was supposed to have. I don't think it had been completed. But what I knew is that there was a tender like that, and I finally got to know later that it was his company that had actually won the job.
Later, before you left or after?
Before I left.
Ketanyi denies that she gave Linturi any information regarding the tender, but doesn't dismiss her officer's involvement altogether.
Maybe when he went and approached the officers then, he could have told them, I am a friend to your chief of staff. And of course, officers will not come to you calling you and telling you, oh, do you know this person? Do we award? Do we do? That will not be anything we discuss with the officers. So my belief is he could have used that relationship we had, which was not romantic then, to secure himself those kind of jobs. Yeah.
Knowing about a tender is one thing, but according to Simon, Fred, and Ketanyi, who would eventually join Linturi in business after establishing a romantic relationship with him, Linturi's group of companies was already primed to win the tender.
Okay, what I could say is that most of those companies were what you call the tenderpreneur kind of companies, where they bid for jobs and they get. So when you're bidding for jobs, you collect expertise here and there, put it together so that you actually make the company look good for it to be able to get that kind of job. Yeah, so basically that's what...
So there's no real experience?
No.
An employee who was involved in the preparation of the tender to supply honorary medals showed us part of the company profile documents they prepared as part of the tender. Then they showed us a company profile for Atticon Construction Limited. Confused? Well, that's because Atticon Construction changed its name to Atticon Limited in mid-2008, seemingly giving it more flexibility to suit itself to the particular tender that was being applied for.
We had a very strong tendering department, a very well equipped. We had a team, a strong team that did the tendering process. Actually, there were nights we spent in the office doing the tenders. Once the tenders were delivered, we could now rest. Yeah, we had to deliver them in good time. We had to make sure the documents were in order.
Simon broke down his allegation about how Atticon, the construction company, won a tender to supply honorary medals to the office of the Deputy President.
Those that deal ODP, Office of the Deputy President, where he tendered his companies, like 6 of his companies, to do the tender for printing services, which, as you are aware, as per the government Public Procurement Act, you're not supposed to actually tender from the same entity more than one document. But in this case, they actually tendered 6 companies to do the same thing. We met with them in the tendering committee. Everyone had their own documents, but you could see that the people there were from the same company. So you could just see that it was something that was just being played there. Yeah, it was just more of a game. And the company that won was Atticon Limited, which, if you go around and look at it, it's a construction company. But in this case, it won for printing services, having said that it does printing in Dubai, which to me, I don't believe that is the case. So they misrepresented themselves and got awarded for the tender, and they think they supplied the medals that they were given to supply.
What is important about this allegation isn't just that different companies, all with ties to Mithika Linturi, bid for the same contract. Simon claims that the directors of these companies were Linturi's employees. We looked into other companies linked to Linturi and found at least 4 companies where his employees were also director shareholders in his business, according to company registration documents.
He uses his employees to register companies, and actually transact with them. And at the end of the day, because you're an employee, whatever comes through that company is his. You have no legal saying, you have no legal right to it. So you are actually used as a dummy to be there so that their money can be channeled through that, those companies.
Two companies with the same beneficial owners cannot bid for the same tender because obviously there's no walls between the two companies, and ultimately it will be seen as collusive tendering, which is definitely sanctionable by disqualification from entering into a contract, or even if a contract has been entered into, it is voidable.
We have been unable to find the original tender document to establish the full value of the tender, but from the leaked dataset of public procurement payments we have received, we do know that Linturi's company, Atticon, was paid 109 million shillings, approximately $1 million, for the supply of honorary medals on the 20th of January 2016.
When a tender comes and you see you have prospects, you put a tender document together, and then you have to collect experiences from various other companies, put it in that company, for that company to look like it has done that job before, so it can be awarded the job. Yeah.
But this wouldn't be the only tender that one of Linturi's companies won at the office of the Deputy President. In June 2014, two companies linked to the senator would supply office furniture and executive stationery, collectively worth 18 million shillings. Remember the point about Linturi not being afraid of starting fights? Well, this is how it relates to this story.
Igembe South MP Mithika Linturi, who was to table a motion for the impeachment of Devolution Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru, met signatories of his motion in a closed-door breakfast meeting.
There are over 170 members of parliament have signed for that petition, for that motion.
In May 2014, Linturi was leading the charge in an impeachment motion against current Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru, who was a cabinet secretary at the time.
After he had acquired the signatures and the impeachment motion was coming up for debate, I think the following week in Parliament, the Deputy President told me to handle the matter. So I looked for him, and he was adamant, and I kind of wooed him, and we went to Naivasha. I think I've said that in the divorce course, and I can say the rest is history. In terms of, by the time the impeachment motion was being tabled in Parliament, he was not there, yet he was the mover of the motion.
Where was he?
We were in Naivasha with him.
Ketanyi and Linturi's romance blossomed in the same month that tenders were being paid out to Linturi-linked companies. Ketanyi has denied her involvement in the awarding of tenders to companies linked to Linturi while she was a chief of staff. A year later, Ketanyi would be dismissed from her post over allegations of corruption. She was cleared of those charges in 2021. Ketanyi is now suing Linturi for allegedly defrauding her and her family by using properties owned by her family to receive bank overdrafts. The case is being investigated by the Department of Criminal Investigations. Linturi is also part of a network of beneficiaries linked to Madeira Member of Parliament Rigathi Gachagua, currently also under investigation by the DCI. Mithika Linturi is different things to different people. A political ally, an estranged husband, a devoted boss.
I got to know him and I was happy working for a politician.
Or maybe not.
A not very straightforward person. And as you're all aware, you've been seeing what has been going around. And I believe where there's smoke, there's fire.
But from the network of companies he has created and the hundreds of millions of shillings that they have collectively won, Mithika Linturi has the template for winning tenders, and he's not alone.
We begin tonight with yet another movie-like script.
There is no Hollywood story to see here. But there are hanging questions about how public officials, from politicians to state officials, can do business with the government in which they serve. This is illegal in countries across the world, but not in Kenya, not since the 1970s. So, how do you win a tender from the government of Kenya? You may need to ask Mithika Linturi. He seems to understand the mechanics of Kenyan tenderpreneurship. We sent questions to Mithika Linturi regarding his roles in these companies. He declined to respond to our questions.